Right, well, afternoon all. At long last we're going to make a start on the Cummins. We've got the Cummins overalls on. Cheers for them, Matt. What I want to achieve is stripping off most of the ancillary components that we can get painted separately, cleaning the engine up itself ready for paint. We're going to replace the front crank seal. We'll obviously do the rear crank seal. There's a few minor bits and bobs to come off the engine, but ultimately the engine runs perfect. I've driven this truck with this engine in and she spins freely. I'll get the socket and we'll put it on the front. So there's not a lot up with that, is there? Hey mate, how you doing? Here's your brew. I'm going back in the start front cab doors. I think he's a bit upset that I got the Cummins overalls and he's had to put up with the Scania overalls and the Arrow XL hat. I can understand it. Anyway, as I said, she rolls over freely, and I want to get to a stage where we've got everything clean and she's in a really good position to go back, but we better have this through, haven't we? So let's have a walk around it and a closer look. Right, the front of the crankshaft here, we've got this harmonic balancer. Obviously it needs a good clean up, so we're going to have that off. Removing that harmonic balancer will give us access to this front engine mounting. As you can see, she's absolutely filthy. That's a clamp arrangement, this bracket, that fits onto that front of that timing cover with basically a pair of big end shells in it. Also, removing the balancer or the crank damper, call it what you will give us access to this throttle shaft. This goes up to the pedal and the bottom of the cab, and obviously gives it that motion, which means that we can go to the pump here. So up here we've got the water pump. The water pump is driven off the auxiliary pulley here, not off the crankshaft. There's normally a bolt in there with an idler on it and an idler and a bearing. The bolt was broken when we got the lorry. Luckily we managed to get it home. So I am looking for a bolt. I've got the idler, I haven't got the bolt. We'll have that arrangement off and that'll give us a good indication of what we're dealing with there. On the offside of the engine here we've got the oil cooler. They are known for being a bit troublesome, but what's bothering me is this pipe's ever so rusty. So obviously if that's gone rusty and it's porous, we've got a problem. So that's going to have to come off so that we can paint both sides of it and try and preserve it. Equally, we've got a short section of rubber hose here that needs replacing for this top water rail. In fairness, this top water rail doesn't look in bad shape. I am going to pull it off the engine and replace the seal in these expansion joints here and here and here and here, and generally get cleaned up. Right, at the back of the engine here there isn't an awful lot to talk about. We've obviously talked about the water rail, the exhaust manifold. Do we play Russian roulette and try and get these bolts out? We'll see how we go on with that. This tap's got to come out of here, again, because when we paint the block I don't want to paint the tap. Plus I want to test the tap and make sure that's okay. So this side then, once we've sort of got through the taps and the water rail and the thermostat housing, that'll sort of be cleaned off. We'll be in a position to really give that a good clean and, you know, be in a place to reassemble, I suppose. Up here we've got an air breather and the middle rocker cover, and we'll address that. We'll get that cleaned up, and obviously as you can see we've taped up the air intake just to protect the engine. Down here, this is where the dipstick bolts on. Now unfortunately it was broken. This bracket here is the upper support for the dipstick, so if you imagine it comes up to here, and then on the Foden on the S80 you would open the door and there's a panel in front of you, take the panel off and you could dip the oil. A lot of people moved this to the back of the cab, and of course on the later models, the S83, it was under the grille. I remember that as a kid, getting back, dipping the oil and putting oil in. Down here we've got the flywheel. We will be pulling this because I want to get to the crank seal behind it. There's no point getting this far with the Cummins especially a 50-year-old Cummins, and not doing that rear crank seal. We'll also modernise and replace this flywheel bearing. I'll get you in a bit closer to that, and you can have a see. It's quite an old-fashioned setup. Right, starting at the top here, we've got the inlet manifold. Shouldn't be a big deal to get that off, and then we've got these injector pipes, and these are looking really crusty in places. So I am going to pull them, and I do want to make sure that we get plenty of paint on them and try and preserve them, because I think they're going to be quite difficult to get hold of. Looks like we've got a little bit of bulging along that seam, but I could be wrong. Won't hurt to replace the gasket in there, because obviously we don't want it to be dragging dirt in and causing us a problem. So this is injector pumpers, PT pump or whatever you want to call it, is the stop solenoid. So again, we'll be pulling that off and just checking that. We'll whip the pump off and check the ancillary drive. Compressors here, and then obviously you've got your auxiliary drive right the way through. All of that needs cleaning up. We've got this pipe here which goes down and feeds into the block just behind this oil filter, and that is the oil pressure supply to the gauge on the dashboard, and that tells us what his oil pressure is on the engine. Down here we've got the oil pressure warning light switch and the oil filter itself. It's a paper element type, so we will be pulling this off, getting it cleaned up, getting all that area masked off, ready for paint, and painting this off the engine, because again, you know, she's getting a bit crusty and we want to make sure that we preserve that. The cam covers seem pretty good. Maybe a bit of a weep on the end of that one, I'm not sure, but we'll see how we go on. And it's generally just a case of let's pull it to bits and clean it up. Let's get the throttle linkage off as well. Great stuff. We'll get back to the front and crack on. So we're just down to that last bolt now, and they've all come out reasonably easy like that. Still feels solid on there. No drawing holes. Well, that's it off anyway. Right, we've got two 5/16 nuts here. 5/16 UNF, half-inch head on them. So we'll get them out the way. Of course, some weight in that. I'm pretty sure that this arrangement on here should swivel, but I could be wrong. But let's get a socket and undo them and we'll drop that off. Beautiful. That looks like it's got a wear sleeve on it rather than a set of shells, but either way, it's there, that'll do. I wish I had something nest in here. We can get the water pump arrangement off. There's a nut in there, pretty sure it's going to be 1 1/8. Needs to be a reasonably thin wall because there's not a lot of room down there, so I'm going to use a chrome socket on the impact gun. Wouldn't normally use that. Might need a new battery as well here. There we go. Right, I think we're going to be into making some sort of puller here, or Well, something's moved, even if it's just the jack. We've moved about 3/16. So 3/16 is better than nothing, folks. Right, we've obviously got a couple of pulls there. I don't think we've moved it on the shaft. Now, that has moved it because the jack's gone further in. Yeah, we're up to around 1/4 inch now, so we were 1 inch, we're about 1.25 inches. There we go. What a swine. Right, hopefully this should just pull it off now. There we go. Wow, she was tight. I suppose what do you expect after 50 years? We've managed to remove the housing now, which is the main object, if you like, because I want to get to this nut that feeds the coolant pipe to the compressor head. I want to take that off and get that cleaned up. Get cleaned up in here. We've obviously had a bird's nest in here at some point, so I want to get that cleaned up. So I'm going to be in a position then to take this bracket off for the alternator and get it all painted and get it all sort of refurbed and just see what we've got, because man, she's crusty. So the final job I want to achieve with this instalment is just to get this pump out. I have been spraying the pump for the last few days with penetrating oil and we've got some movement in there now. This pump is offset, and the idea being that you can move it and adjust the tension on the belt, obviously for a different application to us because we had the adjuster here on that other bracket. So a few good smacks with the soft hammer and I'm hoping that'll be out, so we'll give it a go. There we go. That's a thing of beauty. Smells antifreezy, and it doesn't feel like there's a lot of play in it, if any. Well, I think you'll agree that inside there is in really good order. I mean, there's no surface corrosion. I think that's testament to the antifreeze. There's some blue antifreeze there, you see, and I think that's testament to the operator running all that antifreeze all year round. Well done, Philip. Right, well, what I'll do is for this instalment, most of you will realise that the hub is now missing off the end of the crankshaft. Not included it in this instalment because it took me the best part of a day to get that off. We had to make a puller and it really was hard going. So overall, whilst it has been a lot of work, I think we've made some good progress. Crank dampers off, water pumps out, we've had a bit of a go here, we really have. I think for everybody who does a restoration, there's one thing that gets under everybody's skin is when people say, haven't you done that bit of a job yet? Because who'd have thought pulling that crank damper hub would have taken me best part of a day. Haven't you done this bit of a job yet? Well, never mind that, mate. Where are you up to with your doors? Well, sterling moss outside. Here we go. Stripped it down, we've de-skinned it. Hinges are soaking in tub. Everything's going really well. You need to make your mind up on what colour we're painting it, because I still haven't got that from you. Actually, he's made a really good point there. Thanks for watching. Sort of three options really on the paint scheme for this vehicle. We can go with the livery that we put on the Fleetmaster and go with them two greens again, which I really like, and they were inspired by when I used to knock about with Graham Bailey, so we could even flip the colours and make the paler green the major colour. We could do a complete fantasy company and make his own livery up on that. And the third livery option for me would be that we put it into Hazelcroft Garage, because Hazelcroft is where it all started for me with Foden's really. My dad drove for him, my dad had a brand new 83 with him. I know some of the ex-owners of that particular business, and I know the guy who owns the business now, so it wouldn't be a big deal to get permission to use that branding. But we need to have some thoughts on it. You know, feel free to let me know your thoughts on it as well. But by the time that door's built, we could do knowing what livery we are going for, because obviously we'll paint as it is. Anyway, thanks for watching. See you next time.